Hello, Ireland. I'm Dermot and he's Dave.
Hey, and welcome along to our Mind Yourself Now panel. We'll be joined by our expert panel in a second. We're here to answer all of your questions, and brilliant questions they are too, that have come in all week, and you can still send them in to us now, Dermot and Dave at todayfm.com.
Now, without further ado, let's meet our experts who've been waiting patiently to talk to you all. First up, we have Fiona Brennan. She's a clinical hypnotherapist who specialises in anxiety, stress and self-esteem issues. Her second book, The Self-Love Habit, is due for publication in February of this year. And for full information, including her free 5-star online therapy course, all you have to do is go to thepositivehabit.com. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you. Delighted to be here, guys. Looking forward to it.
We've also got Ronan Murphy. He's the founder of Toned Fit Gym and Viking Built Personal Training, and the new hashtag #FitBy15 60-day challenge. Ronan's here to bust any myths and jargon and answer questions in as simple a form as possible. Getting fit and healthy is a lifestyle change, so make sure it's fun and it fits for you and your life. Keep it simple. TonedFit.com is where you'll find Ronan, and he's here with us today. How are you, Ronan?
Hey guys, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Elsa Jones is a nutritional therapist and author of a best-selling book, Goodbye Sugar. How often we have tried to say that. She offers online nutrition and weight management programs, as well as free weekly workshops via Instagram Live. You can find her on elsajonesnutrition.ie. Hello, Elsa. Good afternoon.
Hi there. I'm delighted to be here in great company.
Dermot Whelan, the man to my right. You may have heard him on the radio every now and again. He is a comedian, he is a broadcaster, but he's also a meditation teacher. And you can find Dermot's website, dermotwhelan.com, where you get all the information you need. But he's here today to answer some of your questions as well.
Yes, and I have my very serious teacher glasses on, which are ones that I bought in a chemist for £5, which I can barely see through. So lovely to be here as well.
Kelly Gagan of Sleepy Stars is a maternity nurse, emergency medical technician, registered paediatric sleep consultant, and super nanny to the stars with over 20 years of experience in childcare. Kelly set up Sleepy Stars in Ireland almost 3 years ago and is now dedicated to helping families in Ireland achieve a good night's sleep. Kelly, how are you?
Hi guys, thanks for having me on.
And sleepystars.ie is the place to go to find Kelly. So thank you very much to all our panel of experts. Let's kick it off with some questions.
The first one is from a busy mum of 3. She says, I have no time for myself. I work part-time. I cook all the dinners. I do all the housework. I have no time for exercise. I make crap meals for myself and for the kids. I find myself catching up on work late at night, meaning I have a terrible night's sleep. How do I find time for myself and explain to my husband and kids that I just need a few minutes? How do I improve our eating without spending hours in the kitchen? Jan in Wicklow, who, to be fair, it sounds like Jan's question could be answered by any one of you guys, because she's kind of spanning a lot of things there. But let's maybe throw that at Fiona first. I mean, there's a busy person there, Jan in Wicklow, and it sounds like she is struggling.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, time is really interesting because we all have the same amount, no matter who we are. We've got 24 hours a day. And what I would say is that, unless you ask for time, no one's going to give it to you. So ultimately, this lovely lady needs to be incredibly assertive and ask for that time and make that time herself. So essentially, it's about boundaries, and it's about actually making time a priority for herself, because in the long run, it is the most selfless thing that she can possibly do. It seems like this running around, this crazy, giving all of her energy to her family and her kids. It's something I see so much of in my work, women in particular coming in, not always, but really on the brink of burning out. And the only way that's going to change is by not just, hoping the time is going to be given to you, but making it a priority and taking that time, sitting down with the family and actually saying, look, we need a proper conversation here where if I don't take this time for myself, there won't be time, without being dramatic. The truth is that if she doesn't take that time for herself, she runs the risk of putting her physical and her mental health at great risk. So it's not up for negotiation. It has to happen.
And that kind of maybe perceived selfishness is, if you're saying that I need time for me, the reason that you're doing that is actually the selfless side of things, because you want to be better at all the other things.
to actually have the help and the motive, the energy to be there for her family. Absolutely. And what's interesting about the question is she even says just like a few minutes. You know, you're talking about a few minutes a day. A few minutes is nothing. You know, we all need time every single day, and it's about taking that time for ourselves rather than waiting for someone to give it. So it does require, you know, I would say on a deeper level, it's really a self-esteem issue in many ways. It's like a feeling of deserving and knowing that we all are equal and we all deserve time for ourselves, and that it's a necessary. It's not a luxury.
As we said, there's a lot to unpack in that, Elsa, and I just wonder from a nutritional point of view, there's probably a lot of people who share that aspect of just feeling like you run off your feet. You know, you're trying to get 100 million things done, but you're trying to help your family to eat well as well. And she said in that message, so she's serving crap food. You know, if time is short, if we are time poor, what options would you recommend, particularly if you're trying to look after a family?
Yeah. And I think she's definitely not alone. I think, you know, parents all around the country are experiencing this. So I think maybe to answer just, I suppose, you know, preparing the meals, I think maybe looking at ways that she can cook smarter, but not harder. And I think that kind of comes down to meal planning. So maybe once a week, sitting down, ideally with her husband or even with the kids, and maybe together coming up with reasonably healthy, family-friendly meals that work for everyone. I'm not a big fan of cooking adult meals and then cooking separate meals for kids. I don't do it in my own family. I never did it from the get-go. So I think planning out meals in advance is really important. And then I know, like, I have small children and I also work part-time. So what has benefited me over the years is kind of adopting sort of simple cooking techniques. So for example, I do a lot of one pot meals, you know, where you're just literally everything's going into the one pot. And once it's in the pot, it's going to just, you know, cook itself. So that makes life easier. I often also double cook meals. So doing large amounts of batch cooking kind of overwhelms me, to be honest with you. So I find the double cook approach really good. And certain meals lend themselves very well to being eaten the next day. So for example, the likes of curries and bologneses or like a lentil dal, they taste just as nice, if not nicer, the following day. So double cook so that you don't have to cook from scratch every single night. Think about family-friendly meals, one-pot meals, one-tray oven meals as well. I often, if I'm tired and I know I have a lot to do, I'll often just do a one-tray meal. So I might do, let's say, pieces of chicken or pieces of cod or whatever, and roasted potatoes and roasted vegetables. It all goes into the one tray, and I can be cleaning up and be doing homework in the background, and the oven is doing all the work. So she probably just needs to find 3 meals that are family friendly, that everybody will eat, and kind of stick with those for the moment. But I do think she maybe should have a chat with her husband and see if there's one night a week that he's willing to take over dinner. Or maybe it's a case, if their budget allows, that maybe one evening a week that they get a takeaway and they try and keep it reasonably healthy. So yeah, just I think she needs to chat to her husband and explain to her that, you know, it's too much for one person.
Yeah, maybe a bit of that assertiveness that Fiona was talking about. That isn't you know, being bitchy about anything. It's literally just saying that if these things don't happen, then the whole thing is going to fall apart. So just stepping up to that, and those conversations can be difficult even amongst partners, and the kids maybe are a bit young, but certainly, yeah, you've got to have them, but they're not easy.
Joe in Mullingar has been on, and Ronan, this is one for you. He says, during lockdown, I've managed to lose a lot of weight, and now I need to move to maintenance. I have no idea where to start, as I've never reached my goal before. When I've gotten close in the past, I've just reverted back to bad habits and ended up where I started. How do I make the move to keeping up with the exercise, and how do I avoid falling back into my bad habits?
Okay, well, hey, Joe, fair play for reaching your goal eventually on your weight loss. That's fantastic. The amount of people I've come across over the years who have gotten so close to it and just like yourself, kind of fallen back into the pit. I think the biggest thing with them is they're getting really, really close to the end, and they realize that they're just about there. And then psychologically, they kind of run out of steam. And then that's why they tend to revert into bad habits. So fair play for getting over the line. The biggest thing with people when they finally reach their goal is, what's the next one? So it's always good to have a series of goals, a short, a medium term, a long term goal in relation to your fitness. So it sounds like he's finally hit kind of finish line, and he's wondering what is it? How do I keep going? So the best thing he can do now is sit down and have a think about the next short, medium, and long-term goals. So let's say, for example, he lost his 10 or 15 kilos. And he should sit down and go, right, what do I want to see in the next 3 weeks? So whether it's learning how to, or joining a gym, obviously the gyms are a little bit hindered at the moment, but starting a fitness regime that I can stick with and start to get into, like say 5-a-side football or just getting out and running. And then after the 3 weeks, then you can progress to the medium-term goal. So what do I see in 6 months' time in relation to my health and fitness? And it can be something as simple as I've joined a football team, or I've teamed up with somebody and we're now working side by side. And that also works in keeping him honest in his training. So you look, let's say for example you plan on going for a run on Wednesday, and you look out the window and it's lashing rain, but your friend who you've rung and you've agreed to go for a run with is still keen on going. You're going to go for that run. The chances of you shirking that and just slinking back to the couch and, like you said, reverting to old habits are less likely to happen. And then long-term goal is something beyond a year from now. And it's, where does he see himself in relation to his health and fitness in 12 months time or beyond? And, it would be something along the lines of, like I've, taken part in the marathon, or I've done my first 10K, or I've managed to get to my weight and maintain it for the last 12 months. Because if you set yourself these goals, it's going to make life a hell of a lot easier when you get back into your training. So from a maintenance perspective, first thing is sit down with a pen and paper, make your 3 goals, short term inside the next 3 weeks, medium term inside the next 3 to 6 months, and long term just over the next year. And then find a friend, get someone, partner, friend, anyone, a team, and just make sure you subscribe and agree to do the same training together. And therefore, you'll be able to be a lot more accountable for your maintenance going forward.
That makes sense. A question for Dermot. I don't feel stress, says Erica in Dublin, in pressured situations. I become calm and uber focused and productive. But my body reacts to stress. I'll lose my hair, I wake up repeatedly through the night, scratch myself in my sleep, etc. I get the key indicators, but I don't feel emotionally stressed. Is this normal, and what can I do about it?
Yeah, first of all, sorry to hear you're going through that from a physical point of view, but nice to think that you have the resilience emotionally and that you feel like it's not getting too on top of you. One thing I would say though, and I'm sure Fiona will have something to say on this as well, for me, in my own experience, I didn't think I was very stressed either until I had a panic attack, back in 2007 when I was driving to a comedy festival. So sometimes our body can actually be giving us clues and quite important messages. So I know when I was struggling with sleep, I used to wake up in the middle of the night. I used to get that itchy skin, restlessness. And at the time, I didn't know what it was. But, looking back now, I know exactly what it was. I was experiencing stress. I'm a big believer in that stress can be a very positive influence if we know the little techniques and tools to turn it off. Because once we allow stress to go unchecked, and I see this a lot with people who generally would be high achievers and quite resilient people, that we can go and go and go and go and still not be aware that maybe stress is creeping in, that we're not turning it off, and it starts to creep into our sleep, and our body will send us quite significant signals. And hopefully it would never progress to the point where you might have something like an anxiety or panic attack. But what's great now is that you are aware of the signs, you're picking up on the signs that your body, you are at some level experiencing stress, even if sort of consciously, day to day, you're not particularly aware of it. So the good news is it takes very little to address that. And once we learn to put in some brakes, turn off that stress response, as I was explaining during the week, it's a bit like when our inner smoke alarm is ringing and ringing. They're great tools to have in your house. If you're sitting near a smoke alarm right now, they're fantastic pieces of kit, but we need them to work when we need them to work. We don't need them to be ringing all the time, because that wears us down and can leave us feeling drained. So it's the same with our inner alarm, and that's our stress response. So it sounds to me like, because you're a real go-getter and you're achieving quite a lot, you have been getting away with a lot. But once you introduce a couple of techniques, of simple breathing techniques, which we'll do at the end of this webinar, you learn to turn off that stress response, which basically gives your body the opportunity to let it do what it wants to do, and that is sleep and relax and hit that rest and digest state. So well done for being aware of it, I would say. But just be aware that your body's trying to tell you something, and with a few easy techniques, you can work closer with your body and hopefully get everything back into sync.
Kelly, one for you. Could you ask Kelly how to wean a 7-month-old off a soother at night time? Once it falls out during the night, she wakes up. And also, how to wean my son off a dummy at nap time? It's the only time he has it.
Okay, so you can't take away a primary source of comfort like a soother without introducing a secondary source of comfort, a snuggie teddy. So an older child, so around 12 months plus, can have a teddy that's about the size of your elbow to your wrist and nice and soft. So if they do bump into it at nighttime, it's squishy. It's not hard stuff teddy. A younger child, the little teddy with the blankies that hang off them. Every time your child gets the soother, offer the snuggie teddy. Do this for about a week to 10 days. And once the other source of comfort has been introduced, it's easier to take away the primary source. There might be a little bit of resistance, there might be a little bit of tears, but as I said before, I drive a lovely Jeep paid for by soothers. Like, they make my business, okay? You are like crossing the hall 8 times at night to pop the dodie in. And often it's right there. You're like, what? You know, and I've had parents who say, Kelly, it's not the dodie. There's one in each hand. There's one in the mouth. And there's 20 glow in the darks in the cots, not the dodie. It is the dodie. When the brain wakes up, when it comes into that light sleep cycle, whatever helped put it into a deep sleep cycle, the soother, it needs again. And the child may find it, but then go, oh, I'm awake now. Where's mommy and daddy? Let's have a party. You know, so introduce a secondary source of comfort first, in preparation of getting rid of it. Really limited just to sleep time. And then you'll have to teach your child how to go to sleep without it.
Yeah.
You've been bringing your snuggie teddy into work for months now, and you seem to be quite settled.
Snooples needs to come with me. And that makes me happy. And Kelly, is there a chance that the secondary form of comfort could end up becoming the primary form? Like, you often hear this, like, you know, sometimes I see it, people beg me to share something on social media where my daughter lost her little teddy in a supermarket or on an airplane or a train station, and what am I going to do? I don't have a spare one or whatever, you know.
Yeah. I tell all parents when we do a consultation, get 3, if not 4, of the exact same. Don't get brave and go, oh, I'll get a grey bunny and a pink bunny, you know, because, you know, when they're a toddler, they're like, I don't want pink. Where's grey? He's like, he's in the wash. Okay, so if they're all the same, then you can rotate them and keep them fresh. But also if they go into daycare, some daycares are still allowing snuggie teddies go in. It goes in on a Monday, comes home on a Friday for a wash. So, but all of the children I nannied for all had snuggie teddies, but they weren't allowed to rock around in the park with them.
Right.
Okay. You wave bye-bye. We see it later.
Related.
We see it at sleepy time. Only sleepy time. If you're napping out and about, hide it in the nappy bag, and when you put them into the buggy, there's your snuggie. But so it's not, you know, just swinging around the house all day long. It's left to the bedroom environment.
And then very quickly, the son with the dummy only at nap time. He's no interested in it at night, just at nap time.
She's lucky if it's only at nap time, but the same, if he's a little bit older, there might be more understanding that no, you're a big boy now, you don't need that. Big boys don't need that. But again, offer him, here, have this dinosaur, he's cool. Big boys have dinosaurs, you know, to try and see if you can move away from that. But older children are very visual. This might sound really cruel, okay, but when Smith's Toys or some shop like that would be open and the parents are like, I need to get my 3-year-old off the dodie, I say, look, go to Smith's Toys. What you're going to do is one of you run in, find a mammy at the till, okay, and go, look, we're going to pay for a new toy with dodies, and you're going to take them, and I'll come back in and I'll pay you. Okay, so you're not giving it to the fairies because they feel like the fairies bring it back after 2 nights of crying. Okay, but the lady in Smith's is not bringing it back. So you go in and you actually go, now give the lady your suitor, and you're going to get this toy. Okay. Now they might have a whinge and a moan, but they're physically out of the house. They know where they're gone. That's an older child, so they've swapped it. So when they have a little bit of a meltdown, you go, oh, here, get your train or your fire truck, whatever it was you got in the toy shop.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
There's one here for you, Fiona, you know, and it's tough when we're dealing with our own stress, but when it's one of our children, it can lead to even more feelings of helplessness. One from Niamh and Claire says, I've noticed my 8-year-old is really struggling. She won't say that she's feeling overwhelmed, but she seems constantly on edge and seems to be always sleepy. I've struggled with anxiety myself in the past, and I don't want her to go down the road I did, which resulted in things like panic attacks. How can I talk to her about how she's feeling? That's Niamh.
Well, I would say that with anxiety, we need to learn how to manage it rather than to get rid of it. So that is the greatest skill we can give to our children, is to help them be at peace with anxiety, because it's something that we all feel at different stages in our lives, sometimes more than others. And that coping skill, knowing that you can tolerate uncomfortable feelings within yourself, is going to be hugely beneficial. So the best thing, again, it goes back to like the previous question, and it's somewhere I always bring it back to, is the first port of call is what kind of energy are you giving? So what kind of, the lady here says that she has suffered from anxiety. She knows, like, so maybe there's a little bit of transference going on there, possibly because she knows how difficult it is to experience anxiety. Physical it is, again, leading back to the question, Dermot, that you asked there recently, or that you answered. So I would say that it's a case of helping her child, her 8-year-old, to realize that she can manage this, to give her the coping skills, to give her breathing techniques. There's some beautiful little, meditations and mindfulness apps that are specifically for children, and just helping her to see that this is not such a bad thing. Like, what a skill, what a beautiful thing to have. Imagine when we were 8, if we'd all had that,
Yeah.
it would certainly have helped us going forward.
That's great. Learning, as you said, that you need a bit of anxiety to function properly is a really, really strong lesson you can teach anybody at any age, but particularly having it as a child is brilliant.
But I think as well, as you touched on there, Fiona, leading by example is a great thing to do. And I suppose, just speaking personally, when my kids saw me start to normalize taking time out for myself, so they went, okay, Daddy's home from work, he's going to take 15 minutes to do his meditation, whatever that is, or he's going to bed and he's listening to the weird app on his phone where the guy's talking in a soothing voice. So when that behavior became normal, I saw that they started to do similar things and ask for those kinds of things, and that for them, lying down and listening to a guided meditation is now normal. So maybe it's something that, you can possibly help by taking on yourself and introducing that habit into your own life if you're not doing it already.
One for you, Elsa. There's a question in from Niall, and he says, my 13-year-old daughter has decided she wants to go vegan. I'm terrified of her being deficient in protein and vitamins, and I've also concerns that it's just her trying to exclude much-needed foods from her diet and the risk of this turning possibly into an eating disorder. Is it possible to have a healthy diet when you're vegan?
I totally understand his concerns. It is absolutely possible to have a nutritionally balanced diet and be vegan. But it does take careful planning and some education around various food groups. So I wouldn't panic. There's nothing to say that just because she's going to become vegan means that it's going to kick off an eating disorder. But I do think as a family, you need to educate yourself in terms of what can constitute nutritionally balanced meals as a vegan. So some things to kind of look out for, because what you don't want actually to happen is, and often young people make this mistake as vegetarians or vegans, is they do it maybe for ethical reasons, but then they end up sort of living off carbs, like maybe, chips and pasta and pizza, which obviously isn't nutritionally balanced. So you need to make sure that she's getting enough protein in at meal times. That's something to consider. So plant-based sources of protein being mainly the likes of beans, lentils, tofu, so nuts and seeds. So for example, the likes of lentils work very well in soups, in stews, lentil dals. Chickpeas are very nice in salads. I do a nice kind of chickpea curry. I do a nice kind of red lentil dal. So I think if you get yourself a good vegan cookbook, ideally maybe by somebody qualified in nutrition, that'll give you loads of kind of ideas and inspiration. But you need to be getting plant-based protein in at meal times, and even for snacks, snacking on things like nuts and seeds is going to give you good sources of plant-based protein and healthy fats. And other nutrients that you need to be very mindful of, particularly at her age group, is the likes of calcium. So whatever plant-based milk she goes for, make sure that it's fortified with calcium. And you also need to be conscious of, is she getting enough B12? And so you're going to have to get B12 in a supplement form. And also iron is something else to consider for a teenage girl. So I think it would be very wise to put her onto a good quality multivitamin and mineral. So if you go into a Good Health store, they'll be able to direct you in terms of the options for a vegan and also for her age category. So you want to make sure you have a multivitamin that has, all the B complexes, particularly B12, iron, vitamin D, biotin. So that will help kind of fill any gaps. But just being, really conscious of getting the balance right at meal times. It may require sitting down with a nutritionist and kind of doing a one-to-one if you want that kind of personalized. And just a little tip around iron. When you eat plant-based sources of iron, so let's just say, chickpeas or nuts or seeds, if you pair it with vitamin C rich food, you will absorb that plant source of iron much better. Oh. So let's just say she had, let's say, a hummus wrap. You're going to get a certain amount of iron from the chickpeas and the hummus, but to enhance that absorption, add in some vitamin C rich foods. So maybe some cherry tomatoes, maybe some sliced peppers. They've got vitamin C in it, or maybe a little glass of orange juice. That will help you absorb the iron. Or if she's snacking on, let's say, a little handful of cashew nuts, which also have a reasonable iron content, maybe have it with a satsuma, or have it with a handful of berries. Again, that vitamin C will help her to absorb the iron from the plant-based.
What it really sounds like is that there's a necessity in a situation like this to learn and not to say, that's something my daughter wants to do, either yes or no. It's more a case of educating yourself on whatever it is. In this case, it's obviously veganism, but if you learn about whatever your teenager is getting into, you're better prepared to answer questions, to make family rules or whatever it is that are going to help that situation. But by educating yourself, you're definitely arming yourself.
Totally agree. And do you know what will probably end up happening is, usually when one member of the family is changing their eating habits, it has a bit of a domino effect on everybody else. So it'll filter through the whole family. And you're totally right. If they educate themselves as a family, they'll probably find now that the entire family, once or twice a week, will end up having a meatless dinner. So I would actually look at it maybe as a potentially positive thing. She may not decide to keep it up long term. I think the more positive the family are, and the more they kind of, work together to do it in a healthy way, then I think over time she'll decide whether that's something she wants to stick to or not. It doesn't work for everyone long term. Yeah. It could just be a phase, but who knows?
Roland, there's one here for you, but I'm not sure you're going to like it. It says, I'm really missing the gym. It's from Colin Rahini. I'm really missing the gym. I was thinking of making the leap and investing in an at-home setup, which essentially puts you out of business. But he says, what are the things we should absolutely be buying?
A gym membership.
Yes, I thought so. A 5-year gym membership.
No, that's fair play to him. So the best stuff that you can get when you're setting up your home gym is to keep it simple and kind of go back to basics. People get really, really caught up in what kind of machine should I buy? What kind of, is it a treadmill or a rowing machine or anything like that? It's not. The stuff that you can do from a cardio perspective, you can do outside, on the road, running up and down. So you don't need a rowing machine, a skiing machine, a bike, anything like that, or sorry, an indoor bike or a treadmill. So spend your money wisely and spend it on the likes of things like barbells, plates, dumbbells, kettlebells, and resistance bands, because all your compound movements, your squats, your lunges, your deadlifts, your press, your rows, and then you can work on your functional full body movements with the likes of kettlebells and dumbbells. And then when it's time for cardio, head out, go for a walk, a run, a cycle, a swim. You don't need to spend unnecessary money on your equipment, which will also probably ramp up. Like let's say, for example, you plug in a treadmill, you're going to ramp up your electrical bills as well. So keep it simple. Stuff you can lift up and put down, and stuff you can pack away into the corner. So you're talking barbells, plates for the barbells. And if you order plates for your barbells, everybody does this. If you order a bar and plates, order collars for your bar. Because if you're going to get plates and you're going to get a bar and you're doing it at home, you're going to break something, because you're going to have a bar on your back and you're going to do this, and the plates are going to fall off, and then the other one's going to fall, and then you're going to end up smashing something expensive. So make sure you order clamps and collars for your bar as well.
And you should probably build a shed in the back garden for when you give up all your gym at home and you need somewhere to store all the gear you've bought.
Yeah, because you've gone back to Ronan's gym.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'll always do you a good deal. If it's decent equipment, I'll always buy it from you.
Fiona, there's one I wanted to bring to you, and I suppose it's very timely given that we've spent nearly a year in this COVID world now. But it's an anonymous one, and it says, how do you cope with the constant anxiety of COVID? I'm permanently questioning every symptom all the time. It's been happening since March. I'm exhausted from it. And I think for someone who's feeling like that, it'll probably be amplified now when we hear things like there's a new strain and it's more contagious. And it just adds to this kind of volume of anxiety that if you're feeling it already, you're going to feel it more.
Absolutely. Yeah, very hard. The first thing I would say is turn off the news. Stop watching the headlines. You know, all of the speculation, all of the constant drip of that coming in is going to intensify this anxiety. And it's easier said than done in terms of, even when a person can make a decision to turn off the news, people will tell them the news. So you start to hear it, whether you like it or not. So you've got to protect your mind as much as you possibly can. The awareness there that anxiety is there is good. You know, for one thing, this person sounds very much aware of the anxiety. It's a health anxiety that probably has found its home, if you like, in COVID. So I don't know, but it's possible that this individual may have felt anxiety in different areas of health before, because that can be something that you know, it finds a new home, if you like, and COVID certainly provides that for anxiety. And you know, the most kind thing he can do for himself is really to realize that the stress is actually doing more damage than COVID could ever do in terms of his inflammation, and the stress response. The cortisol is going to put him more at risk of catching any illness, whether it's COVID, the flu, you know, any type of ill health. So really being incredibly mindful and absolutely getting into a steady practice of sitting with the anxiety, but being practical in terms of turning off the news, not listening to it, because all it does each time, it's like a trigger of the numbers. And then, you know, we can all relate to that, how that can be incredibly frightening. So protecting his mind and working again on getting his whole nervous system to feel safer and to feel calmer will be the best sort of boost to his immune system that he could possibly do. Because the fear just keeps prolonging it.
Yeah, is there a sense that catastrophizing, you know, can be a debilitating kind of condition where you just always think the worst is going to happen? But is there some practice that if you were to catastrophize in your mind in a controlled environment and step through the worst things that could possibly happen, by doing that you can actually realize that, oh, so if all of the terrible things that I keep fantasizing about actually happened, it would still be okay, or it isn't actually as bad as I thought, or the likelihood of this particular thing happening. Like, is there a tool there somewhere that I'm just stumbling across?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying, Dave. It's basically, and it's a very good point, because we often do underestimate our ability to cope. So let's say the worst case scenario is for this person is that he does get COVID, for example.
Yeah.
well, the chances are, hopefully he's going to be much more able to deal with that than he imagined. He'll be able to recover, he'll be able to get over it. And therefore, all of the months of intense fear and anxiety have been completely futile because he's underestimated. And this is something that people with anxiety will often do, is underestimate their ability to cope with a situation and overestimate the situation being, something that they can't cope with. Yeah. So keeping that in mind, it can be a very useful mental sort of attitude to adopt is, okay, even if that happens, I'm going to, I will be okay. And that's a sense of more autonomy and self-control, because I think that's what, COVID has brought up for so many people, is this sense of things being out of our control.
Yeah.
And that is, very fearful in terms of we can't control the numbers, the spread, etc. But we can, and always has to come back to, we can control our response to the situation. And we're much more able to cope from that place. So yeah, it's a really good point, Dave.
There's one here, I think, Dermot, maybe you'll help us with this one. And there's a couple of people of you guys who could help this one. But it's, how do you switch off? And this person says, and they say it in caps, I mean totally switch off. It's Kira in Kerry. We rescheduled our wedding from last October to March this year, but now it looks unlikely. I wake up thinking about the wedding during the night. I can't get back to sleep. It's having a real effect on my moods, eating habits, lifestyle, etc. I'm stressed and tired, and having to put on a smile every day had me feeling even worse. Any help would be so much appreciated, says Kira in Kerry.
Well, sorry to hear, Kira, that you're going through that, but it's a very, very common thing that so many of us just don't know how to switch off, and the things we're used to that we think switch us off often don't do the trick. So for instance, sitting down to watch 3 episodes of Vikings, like I like to do, as much as I would like to think that switches me off, it doesn't. In fact, the old cortisol levels will be raging after looking at one of the many war and battle scenes in that thing. So the very act of sitting down on the couch to watch something, even though you may think it's relaxing you, actually it's not. If you measured your cortisol levels during that, you'll probably find that often they might be higher, as I mentioned. So it's about building in a weird thing, I suppose, we associate switching off with a passive activity, like flopping down on the couch. Whereas we actually need to get a little bit more active about switching off. And it could be whatever works for you. So for instance, I know what switches me off is going for a walk with my dog in the woods. And even though that's quite an active thing to do, the act of doing it actually helps me to switch off. So even 20 minutes of doing that will switch me off. Obviously, as a meditation teacher and practitioner, for me, that's another active thing. I have to carve out that time. And even though I may look like I'm sitting down or lying down and listening to something, it's not a passive exercise. You are engaged in that process. But again, that switches me off. And it kind of points back to the inner smoke alarm that I spoke about earlier, our inner stress alarm. Anything that manages to turn that off, even if it's for a few seconds, even if it's like the 16-second meditation that I talk about, anything that just forms that pattern interrupt, that's what we're looking for. So just maybe have a look, I would say, is what do you do when you get home and you want to switch off? And in all the corporate talks that I give at the moment, the big thing that's coming up for people is, how do I switch off because I'm working from home? Because those lines are blurred. Normally it's, I've got my work hat on and I'm doing my work, and then even the commute can act as that breaker to switching off, to allow us to put on the parent hat or this, the spouse hat or whatever it is. But when those lines are blurred now, it's even harder, and I hear a lot of people they're on their laptop, on Zoom calls all day and our meetings and WebEx or whatever it is. And then they go, okay, well, time to switch off. And then they'll literally go Control-Tab into Netflix, and they'll be in the same chair and they'll watch 3 episodes of something. And it's not to make you feel guilty about doing that, but that's kind of what we've been trained to do. So we have to work, particularly with the world the way it is now, with so many of us working from home, we have to be a little bit more active about trying to create those pattern interrupts, trying to create those breaks, as weird as it might, as different as it might seem. Because if you've been at your desk all day, if you've been hunched over your laptop, you might need something like a walk. You might need to just remove yourself from the environment, and because you don't have those natural breaks anymore like you would have had in life pre-COVID.
Yeah, you and I've spoken before about how playing the bass guitar for me is one of those things that that's an activity. I'm getting my bass, I'm plugging it in, I'm putting on my headphones, whatever. But for some reason, playing that completely switches me off, even though I'm physically and mentally doing something. It has that effect. It's a strange one, but it definitely works. So hopefully that'll help you, Ciara. Kelly, Orla wants to know, my 2-year-old's almost too good at sleeping. I'm trying to put you out of a job now, Kelly. But he's dreadful for waking up. It can normally take him hours to really wake up. People say I'm blessed, but I'm worried it's not normal, says Orla.
Okay, so he needs he's 2, so around 11 to 12 hours at night and in and around 2 hours nap in the day. I've worked with young children who like that after their nap. They're like groggy teenagers. They just don't want to get out of bed, but the worst thing you can do is go over to them and say, okay, let's go to the park. La, la. They'd be like, whoa, what's going on? Open the curtains, turn on a bit of music, potter around and let them come out of that sleep nicely. Okay. And sometimes it is a case of, making suggestions just out there, oh, I wonder what we're going to go to do today. Will we go see if we can see the fish in the pond, whatever it is. So you will see the kind of coming out of that slumber going, oh, that sounds good. Let them come out on their own time. He might be on the higher end of sleep requirement, and that's okay. I'm a twin, and I hop out of bed at 5 a.m. in the morning. Like, don't look at my twin sister until 10 a.m. and she's had 2 coffees. Like, seriously, don't even look at her. Okay. I'm like an Energizer bunny, just like bouncing it. So I'm on the lower end of things, which is great fun for my parents. And she would be on the higher end of sleep requirements. So every child is different. Don't compare your child to your friend's child. Once he is happy, and allow him to wake up gently by himself. Don't be going in and go, right, we have to get in the car, we have to go to the supermarket. If you know you're doing that, open his bedroom door, open the curtains. The light tells the brain to stop producing the melatonin in the morning. So, let that light in to see if he can wake up and make a few suggestions about what we're going to do for the day. But don't start pulling out of him.
That makes sense. Elsa, I love this one. It's from Mel in Dublin, and it sounds a little bit like it's a humble brag, but can you overdo it with the good foods? Can some counteract the others? I blend up baby spinach, banana, blueberries, avocado, peanut butter, honey, and kale with milk. Is it too much?
Wow. I know, I'm the same. I just feel too healthy some days.
Yeah.
Like, someone else, can I give you some of my health? I'm overflowing here.
What do you think, Elsa?
Do you know what? There is such a thing as overdoing it on certain healthy foods. The ones that I would see most often is nuts and nut butters. So, you might have a consultation with somebody and talk about healthy snacks, and maybe, instead of biscuits, having, a palm full of nuts, but they don't actually take in the fact that I said palm full and they think handful, fistful of nuts. So that's a really common one I see people make is they'll say to me, God, you know what? I wasn't hungry at all. It was great. And then I chat through what they've been eating and realize that they've actually eaten a full bag of almonds or Brazil nuts.
Right.
So nuts, people overdo the nuts. So it should literally be a palm full, whatever fits into the palm of your hand.
And what's the downside of overdoing the nuts? Is it just calories or?
Simply too many calories. Yeah. I mean, obviously, nuts are really nutrient dense, but they're also very calorie dense and they have a high fat content. So really, 1 to 2 portions of nuts or a nut butter is plenty in a day. So if you have a handful of nuts, let's say, or a poundful of nuts, as a snack, and then you had a tablespoon of nut butter in your smoothie, that's enough nuts or nut butters for the day. Another common one that people sometimes overdo is fruit. So obviously fruit is all part of a healthy, balanced diet. It should make up part of our 5 a day. But if you are trying to lose weight, and if you're struggling losing weight, maybe look at the amount of portions of fruit you're eating, and particularly take a look at the fruits that are higher in naturally occurring sugar. So The trick is if it tastes very sweet, like let's say banana or grapes or watermelon, it's going to have a higher sugar content. So you just need to be mindful of the portion sizes. So people would often say to me, okay, so if I crave something sweet, I just have a banana. And then I'll look back on their food diary and realize they had also had a banana in their smoothie at breakfast. So now they're having 2 bananas. It's too much. Or, I'm trying to eat healthy, so I just keep a punnet of grapes beside me and I just snack on those. You can't just graze on fruit all day long. A small banana, half a banana in a smoothie, or a handful of grapes is perfect, but don't overdo it on the sweet fruits. And avocados is another one that people tend to go over the top with. Like, again, avocados, really, really nutrient dense foods, really good quality, heart healthy fats. But I suppose it's a real kind of millennial thing, isn't it? The whole avocado smash with your poached eggs.
Yeah.
But some of us are overdoing it, I think. And again, you could throw an avocado into a smoothie in the morning and then have avocado smash with poached eggs for lunch, and then maybe have guacamole with your chicken fajitas later. A half to 1 avocado in a day is plenty. So yeah, even the so-called healthy foods can be overeaten.
So that balance is just the key thing, just to try and find that. I know my eldest fella, when he was 6, had to go to the dentist for a filling, and we were like so mortified. And the dentist was asking us questions about his diet, and she's like, he doesn't have enough sweets and sugar in his diet. She said, does he eat fruit? And we're like, oh God, he just won't stop. She's like, okay, so he's eating far too much fruit. He's never washing his mouth out afterwards. He's brushing his teeth at night or whatever, and he ended up getting a cavity from fruit sugars. So we definitely never gave him sweets ever.
You're a terrible parent.
Yeah, it's true.
Ronan, there's one for you here. What kind of exercise would you recommend for a child? And I know you do a lot of work in schools around Dublin. My young fella isn't into team sports and isn't great with the outdoors, but I'd love for him to get into good habits young, says Ed in Cork.
Okay, fair play for being a practical parent, because there's too many parents these days that let their kids just sit in front of a screen all the time. When you get to kids, the best thing you can teach your kids is compound movements. So just to break that down, a compound movement is any movement that requires multiple muscles and multiple joints at the same time. So for example, if you do a squat, sitting down on a chair, that's a compound movement, because the joints you're using are your ankles, your knees, and your hips, and the muscles you're using are your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, and your core, essentially. There's a lot more little smaller muscles, but we won't get into that. So the 6 compound movements that it's been basically boiled down to, and it's squat, lunge, deadlift, or hinge, overhead press, chest press, and row. So if you could get your son into talking to a trainer and get the trainer to teach them how to do these 6 compound movements, you're setting them up massively for the rest of their life. Because when I've trained people from the age of 5 all the way up to the age of 95. And I can spot the people who have learned how to do these movements from a very young age, just because it's so natural to them. And then when you're trying to teach someone who's a lot older these exercises in their 30s or 40s, it's like trying to teach them Japanese. Like it just does not go in, because their body has never moved in that manner. So if you get your kid into these compound movements from as early as possible, they don't have to be load bearing. It's body weight load. If you get them doing that from day one, you're going to set them up massively from a health perspective, from a muscular and a tendon, a ligament, a joint perspective. Also for testosterone production, especially in guys when they're going to go through their hormonal changes from the ages of 12 upwards. They're going to benefit massively from knowing these compound movements, because you're actually giving your testosterone a direction in which the body can use it, as opposed to just sitting on a couch and the body's just producing testosterone and it's going into the likes of acne and bad skin, all that kind of stuff, and mood swings. If you're doing these exercises, you're going to actually use up the testosterone the body is producing, and therefore have better sleep, and you're going to have a better attention span, and you're going to be a lot more open to your parents saying stuff to you, as opposed to just kind of screaming at them Kevin style.
Well, it's funny, because you've obviously trained myself and Dave in the past. That's why we're the physical specimens we are. But also, you have Dermot Dave, absent again. But I know you also happen to be teaching my son in the local school with your Tone Fit program that you have installed there. And my son came home, he's 14, the other day, and he said, Ronan, we were doing Tone Fit today. I love Tone Fit. Ronan said my technique is excellent. and I actually got a jolt of jealousy. And I was like, what? Oh, I couldn't be that excellent. He definitely told me I had excellent form in the past, so...
It all depends on how much they're paying me, basically.
Yeah. Anyway, it's working with him, so good advice.
Fiona, one for you. It's a bit of a sad one. The person doesn't want us to read out the name, so we won't. But it says, lockdown's been terrible for my marriage. We're constantly at odds over everything from money to childcare to division of labour. I honestly don't know if we'll make it through 2021. I'm finding myself getting stressed and, to my shame, aggressive. My jaw seems to be constantly clenched. When we get into discussions, they always turn into shouting matches. I don't want my relationship to end, but I don't know how to calmly address everything.
Okay, so again, there's a lot in that. And, you know, the part that really resonates with me is I don't want my marriage to end. So that's a good thing, right? So let's focus on that. Because, you know, this lady, and I totally respect her desire to be anonymous, is not alone. I don't think lockdown has been brilliant for anybody's marriage or relationships. You know, it's obviously going to put a strain on people, because I don't think we've ever spent as much time as we, you know, like in the normal course of life. We have our comings and our goings, and you know, there's much more activity and energy passing through a house. So of course it's going to put a strain. But what I would say is that whatever that strain is, it was probably there before. So lockdown is not the problem, but it has highlighted issues that needed to be probably addressed. So, you know, I would say that what's really helpful is there's a beautiful Buddhist monk. I'm going to bring some kind of Zen Buddhism into this, and his name's Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk. Dermot might be aware of his work. And, you know, he talks a lot about love and relationships. And I would say that, you know, his words of wisdom can be very, very helpful in terms of when we feel sort of unrest within our relationships. It is about looking at that person in terms of what expectations are you putting on them? And when we're suffering because of a relationship, as sort of counterintuitive as it sounds, what we need to do is actually go to that person and explain, I'm suffering, I'm trying my best, you know, but I'm actually finding this really, really hard. And when you sort of approach relationships in that way, when you take away this sense of, you know, you're not doing this, going into that kind of argumentative, defensive, what happens is, to all of us, if somebody says, oh, you never do this, you never do that, we immediately, our instinct is to defend ourselves. But when you actually take a hugely, like a 360-degree turnaround, and you say, you know, I am really finding this hard. But what we do see in that in that message is, I don't want the marriage to end. So really focusing on what is the good in your partner. But in order to see the good in your partner, you've got to see the good in yourself first. So I would say that there's two things that will really help is really getting closer to understanding and accepting that lockdown has been hard on this individual herself, and then how that has transferred out into her relationships. And really being able to have that courage to have those conversations. Like we were saying, like you said yourself, Dave, earlier, you know, there's conversations there that can be really hard to have, but they are much harder to not have.
And is there a time, or I'm sure there isn't a formula, but like when you know in your heart that it's necessary to bring in somebody else, in other words, to go and talk to a counsellor or a therapist or someone to just lay both sides of all of the arguments out on the table?
Yeah, it's absolutely. And what's really interesting is that when people do go for marriage counselling, they often go with the idea that the therapist is going to simply just say, look, I told you, it was all him. She's the one. And that the therapist is going to verify this, and it'll all just be so obvious. Whereas what happens quite often is that in the counselling, they discover that their part to play. You know, it's always, there's always two sides to it, and communication along the way has been lost. So the frustrations perhaps over lockdown have just added to something that probably needed some loving care, regardless of COVID-19 and the lockdowns.
I don't want to make light of obviously that, you know, that person's question. They're obviously struggling, going through a tough time, but it reminded me of, there's an episode of Ozark, that series, I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix, where there's a couple going to the couple's counselor, and it turned out that both of them were bribing the counselor separately to say that they were right. You know? So
one ended up paying more than the other.
Yeah, we wouldn't recommend that course of action.
Dermot, for you, another anonymous one. How do you cope when you hate the stress that your job brings, but you love what you actually do? I've always loved my job, but it's taking and has taken so much of my life. Working from home has only proven that my life can't continue the way it is.
You know, that's really interesting, and my heart goes out to you, because I can really empathize, because there were stages in my life doing many different kinds of jobs where, you know, I've always loved my work. I love being on stage. I love being on the radio. I love teaching meditation. I love writing. You know, I've done lots and lots of jobs, but that doesn't mean that doing something you love can't wear you out or burn you out. So oftentimes we can sort of just drift through our lives for many years without actually re-examining the reasons why we're doing a particular job or why we're in a particular role. My meditation teacher was a chap called David G, and he had a very interesting approach, and it was one that I used, and I found it really helpful. And he calls it your winning formula. And what that is it's something that we pick up early in life, and it sets us on a trajectory. And what it is basically, and I'm sure Fiona can attest to this as well, when we're young, we sort of mold ourselves into patterns, and then we sort of set off on that route. So for instance, to give you a better example, for me, I realized that at some point in my early teens that humor got me out of situations, and potentially bullying situations and things like that. And actually it became a really useful tool for me. I realized I was good at being funny, and I could actually use that to get what I want or get away from what I don't want. So that kind of set me on a path. And without ever really revisiting it again until much later in life, I realized that everything I was doing was kind of built on this same programming. It's like, you know, we often update the software in our phones and on our computers, but how often do we look at what software we're running inside ourselves and in our minds? So this winning formula for me was humor works for me and it gets me what I want. So off I went, and I found myself in a career with lots of different jobs where humor was at the core. But what I needed to re-examine when I actually looked at my winning formula, I went back and did that kind of exercise of just writing out on a couple of pages, you know, where did it all begin for me? Once I realized that actually, you know, there are aspects of my job that I'm possibly doing for the wrong reasons, or doing for reasons that were important when I was 15 or 16. And actually, I still like the essence of my job, but a few little tweaks could actually help me be in a much more happy and calm place and less burnt out, because that's what it sounds to me like. You're entering into that phase of just being burnt out, and you feel like you're on the treadmill and you keep saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. I love my job, but it's killing me, and I don't want to have to quit it. So my advice would be to take a little bit of time and sit down with yourself. Even better if you can sit down with a professional, say a psychologist, or maybe someone who could advise you with your career, and really re-examine the reasons for why it is you do what you do. And then when you start to zone in on that, you can start to set your new winning formula based on what's right for you at this moment in time. So maybe you love the idea of your job, you know, the creativity involved in it, the energy, the people you work with, but actually maybe the format that's in doesn't suit your needs anymore. So maybe have a look at that, but always talking these things out with someone else who's not really, really close to you, who doesn't have any kind of agenda or dependency on you. I think that can be really helpful. And also, you know, I'm a big fan as a meditation teacher of taking time out for yourself, creating those pattern interrupts, as I said. So sitting down to do a guided meditation once a day, that will give your mind and your head that space that you seem to need at the moment, just to possibly look at other options for yourself, because sometimes we can be so overwhelmed, it's even hard to think about these things. So creating a little bit of space, then looking at your winning formula and seeing what it is you really want to do now.
We're running out of time, but let's get to a couple more if we can quickly. Kelly, there's a young baby involved here, a 6-week-old baby from Cleena. And she says, the baby gets very unsettled and uncomfortable after feeding despite burping efforts. She does burp, but it doesn't seem to help, which seems to cause her to spend big tracts of time awake. She's actually gone 16 hours straight on one day and about 5 hours straight on average the others. We can't get her to sleep during those times, so she gets so tired she eventually just goes off. She sleeps for about 2 to 3 hours at a time during the rest of the time. Any advice, says Cleena?
Okay, so young babies, especially around 6 weeks old. 6 weeks old is where reflux symptoms can come up to say hello. And reflux symptoms, a reflux baby typically will have some of their feed, burp, but won't go back on. They'll want to go on, but they can't go back on because they're uncomfortable. So, and that can be lingering throughout the day and night. So there's a level of discomfort there. So she might want to talk to the GP. There's loads of things you can do there. One of the best brand bottles, if I can say, for a child with wind issues is Dr. Brown's, in my opinion. You start off on a number 1 top on the top of the bottle. Around 10 weeks, you go up to a number 2 top. I've worked for so many parents, and part of the sheet they fill in, I'm kind of saying, I wonder where top is on the bottle, and they're going, looking at each other going,
What?
Okay. Child could be 9 months old on a number 1 top. And I'm like, yeah, that's the tiniest straw in the world. That's why your baba's falling asleep on the boppy. Okay. So maybe look at the bottle that's been used, but also there's different formulas. If baby's being breastfed or on breast milk, there's other things we can do, medication and things. When baby's been awake for such a long stint, you're in a vicious overtired cycle, and it's very difficult to get out of that. You're going to really have to offer loads of sleep assistance. You might rock, and they finally fall asleep, and then you sit your bottom on the chair, and then we're rocking again because they've just woken up, because they never fall into that deep sleep cycle. So your child is in an overtired cycle, which is most likely because they're uncomfortable. So not a complete diagnosis, but it's a good chance. I often see reflux saying hello around the 6 to 8 week mark. So it's probably related to that.
Okay. Elsa, I have a sweet tooth, says Deb in Longford, but I switched from sugar to honey for my tea and coffee, but I'm going through about 200 grams a day. I know that's excessive. What is the healthiest sweetener?
Okay, so first of all, 200 grams a day is a lot of honey. It's about a jar of honey, so it is way too much. Honey is more natural than sugar, and it does, offer some health benefits. There is some, minerals in it, but purely from a weight perspective, and also a blood sugar perspective, honey will raise your blood glucose level in the same way that sugar does. So it'll give you that big kind of blood sugar spike exactly the same way as, regular refined sugar would. Also, the net effect is it's going to cause weight gain if consumed too much exactly the same way as sugar would. So yes, whilst it is natural and has some mineral value, the effect on your blood sugar and the effect on your weight is going to be the same. So he really does need to cut down. I don't recommend artificial sweeteners. So I think probably the best options for him would be trying to kind of go for a natural plant-based alternative. So the likes of stevia would probably be a good option for him. Xylitol is not bad either. The only thing about xylitol or any of the sugar alcohols, so you'll know if they end in OL, is if you can consume too much of them, you can get stomach upset, so wind, diarrhea. And I've had clients in the past who have been consuming a lot of xylitol and then do develop IBS type symptoms. So it's something to be mindful of. But also, no matter what you choose, so let's say he goes for stevia, he still needs to look at how much he's using. If he's using, spoon after spoon of whatever sweetener it is, he is never going to be able to retrain and reset his taste buds away from sweetness. So he's replaced all that sugar with honey, but he's not going to be able to reset his taste buds. So I think what he needs to do, no matter what he chooses, is just bit by bit reduce the amount that he's using. So, you know, if he was using 4 teaspoons, now start using 3, and then next week 2, and then the following week get it down to 1. It's going to be hard. Your food and your drinks are not going to taste as nice as you would like them to, but I just think you're going to have to just tough through it. By 4 weeks' time, your taste buds will reset and you will get used to less sweet food. And that's ultimately what you want to be aiming towards.
Okay, sounds good. We're very close. We've got time for one more, Emer? Okay, Ronan, because this is a general one, I think it'll help a lot of people, particularly after Christmas and everybody got themselves a Fitbit or some kind of wearable. Is walking 10,000 steps a day enough to stay fit, or do I need to be doing more? Liz in Dublin asked that, but I think the entire nation's asking that question.
Okay, I hate to burst people's bubbles, but no. Okay, if you're going to do 10,000 steps a day, great, you're getting some exercise. It's not going to massively increase your level of fitness. It'll somehow maintain what you've currently got. But in order to increase your fitness levels, like fitness is basically strength, cardiovascular capacity, cardiovascular endurance, flexibility, mobility. It's all of these under one umbrella. So think of fitness as an umbrella, as opposed to just, he can run 5 kilometers in 15 minutes. He's really fit. He probably couldn't deadlift his own body weight. That's the thing. So it's a general under an umbrella type thing. So the 10,000 thing, I got really annoyed about that because about a year or two, or maybe even longer, people were referring to 10,000 steps a day. And I did some research on it. And it turns out that the guy who said 10,000 steps, he's a professor of cardiology, as far as I'm aware. Now, it could be wrong, could be misquoting, but he basically made an educated guess and said, listen, you need to be doing about 10,000 steps a day in order to be up and moving and essentially justifying your BM, or your base metabolic rate. So basically the base amount of calories you need in order to not put on any more excess weight. So it's a real general term, and it's like, as we all know, we're all different. So it's not going to work for you. It might work for someone else. It might work for me. So what I would suggest is start with 10,000 steps. Brilliant. It means you're actually on the right step, pardon the pun, and then start introducing other exercises. So like I've said before, have a look at your compound movements. Maybe get into a team sport. Maybe get into some light running, some rowing, some cycling, and add on top of that 10,000 steps. And then you're going to be into a higher level of fitness territory. But you don't want to neglect the muscles and the joints and tendons and ligaments and all this support structure of the body. So if possible, incorporate some resistance work in with your 10,000 steps.
Can we do like 1,000 steps and then push the other 9 into next week?
Yeah, and then by the end of the year, you've got something like 4.5 million steps.
Saved up. They're like supermarket points. Surely you can put them towards a free jug kettle or something.
Look, we're just about to wrap up, but there is a question in for you, Dermot. It's just, can you show us the breathing techniques again, the exercises you did on the air? Because we had a massive response to the stuff that you were doing on the radio and you've done before. So can you just give us a little breakdown of the useful, quick tools we can do?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, a lot of feeling better and calmer and sleeping a lot better is just knowing a couple of techniques to turn off our stress response, which sometimes, particularly at the moment, can be ringing throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month. So these techniques, you don't have to sit down for an hour. You don't have to be constantly wearing white linen, looking really good on Instagram with hair like Russell Brand. That's all nonsense. You don't have to climb a mountain. All these pictures on Instagram I see are beautiful people perched on mountaintops or out on the edges of wooden jetties on lakes meditating. It's really impractical. Nobody's going to wake up in the morning and run up, Caron Tool and then come back down again before breakfast, okay? So my advice is do these wherever you're comfortable, wherever it's safe to do so. You can even take them on the go and do them in the queue for a shop, or if you're sitting in traffic, as long as you keep your eyes open, wherever you feel like doing them. Okay, so the first one I'm going to do is very, very simple, and actually it's one that you can use with your kids as well, because I know my own kids have used this in the past, and basically it's called belly breathing, all right? So it's the first one we're going to do. And all it is teaching us to breathe properly. And I know I can hear you saying, actually, Dermot, I've pretty much been breathing most of my life. I think I've got this down. A lot of us tend to breathe through our mouth, and we tend to breathe quite shallowly. And particularly if we're under a bit of pressure, feeling a bit of stress, we tend to breathe in a more rapid, shallow manner, okay? So what breathing through our nose does, and that's part of belly breathing, is it encourages us to use this amazing air filter that's stuck to our face. We might as well use it. But it also encourages us to, when we breathe through our nose, we take more air down into the lower part of our lungs. And down there, we've got lovely receptors, lovely blood vessels that are going to pull more of the oxygen out of your breath and bring it around your body and up to your brain to keep you feeling energized and awake. So the idea with belly breathing is very simple. We put one hand on our belly, and then we breathe in through our nose. And instead of feeling like going into the top half of your chest, I want you to breathe in through your nose and imagine the air is going down into your belly, and you can feel your belly rise and fall underneath your breath. And that's what we're looking for, okay? It may take a couple of seconds to get that sort of synced in. So take a nice, long, slow, deep breath in through your nose and feel your belly rise underneath it. And if you can, just hold the breath in your belly as it's pushed out for a couple of seconds. Gently let that go. And you can breathe out through your mouth or through your nose. But the important thing is we're breathing in through our nose. Another one of those for the crack. Down into your belly. And if, like me, after 10 months of lockdown, no problem finding the belly. And then gently let that breath go. So that's belly breathing. Really simple technique. And you may think, God, what's that going to do for me? This is one of those pattern interrupts I was talking about. This can stop your stress response. Because if you think about fight or flight, what's happening in your body? You're perspiring more, hence the clammy hands. We've all felt that in the past. Your heart's beating faster. You have more stress hormones going through your system. Your blood pressure's up. You're perspiring. I said that already. So what happens when we do one of these simple exercises, just like belly breathing, what we're doing is actually flipping that on its head. We're turning off that stress response. So we lower our heart rate. We lower our blood pressure, we lower the levels of stress hormones, and we increase sex and growth hormones. So basically we're allowing our body to do what it wants to do in that lovely rest and digest state. So that's belly breathing, okay? And you can run a few of those together, 2 or 3. You can do it for a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever you want, whenever you want, okay? Scientifically proven to turn off your stress response. So the second one we're going to do is 16 seconds. You might have heard me talk about this before. No harm if you have to try it again and just do a little bit of a refresher. So this is sometimes called square breathing or box breathing. And the idea is that we're using that belly breathing technique, but we're counting to our breath. So we count in, or we breathe in rather, to a count of 4. Then we hold that breath in our belly to a count of 4. Then we gently watch that breath leave our bodies to a count of 4. And then we hold that breath out to another count of 4. And there's your 16 seconds. So get nice and comfy and give this a go. Even if it feels a bit strange, just go with it. You have nothing to lose. You've taken the time out for yourself. So just take a nice, long, slow, deep breath in through your nose, and I'll count for you, okay? So take the breath in. Feel the belly expand. 2, 3, 4. Now hold that breath in your belly there. Really good. 2, 3, 4. Now gently let that breath go out through the nose or mouth, whatever you want. 2, 3, 4. Now just hold that breath out before you inhale again. 2, 3, 4. Now just breathing normally. So that is the 16 seconds, square breathing or box breathing. These are techniques used by the military, in case you think it's a little bit woo and only for, hippie Californian types. This is used by military and police forces all over the world. It helps them to stay calm in challenging environments. They even use it to sleep in very challenging environments as well, if it's the military and they're out on whatever those things are that they do out on the mountainside. I'm clearly not an army type. And I'll give you one more very quick one. We won't go through it in great detail here, but we were using our breath there as an anchor. So let me just explain meditation really quickly for you, and as simply as I can. Meditation is focusing your mind on one thing, for instance, your breath. And when your mind wanders off, which it will, you gently guide it back to your breath, okay? So that is meditation, simple as that. Our mind will wander off each time, and it may wander 50 times in a meditation session that's only 2 minutes long. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean your brain is broken. All you're doing, each time you realize your mind has wandered off, you gently bring it back to the focus of your attention, which is your breath. Sometimes we can replace that breath with something called a mantra, which is basically a syllable, a word, or a phrase that we repeat silently in our mind, okay? So for instance, I am, okay? Very simple one. I like to use this when I'm feeling a little bit of overwhelm because it reminds me that, you know, beyond, if you think of the ocean, all the waves are crashing around on top, and down below, it's a lot calmer. And for me, that's my I am space. So where I don't have a dad hat on, or a co-host hat on, or a radio hat on, or a comedy hat. It's just my essence underneath everything. So if you can, get nice and quiet, just breathe calmly, and just repeat the phrase, I am, silently in your mind, over and over again. And anytime your mind wanders off, you gently guide it back to I am. And try that for about 2 minutes, okay? Just start with 2 minutes, and you can lengthen that out. And even if you do that sometime in your day, you're turning off that stress response, letting your body hit that rest and digest state so you can reset for the next challenge you have ahead of you. So you have 3 things there. You've got belly breathing, you've got the 16 seconds, and you've got the I am mantra meditation. You can find all of these on dermotwhelan.com if you want to, if you didn't manage to catch all that.
Okay, yeah, dermotwhelan.com to go for some meditation expertise. If you want to create your positivity as much as you can, go to Fiona Brennan's website. That is thepositivehabit.com. Looking after your body, tonedfit.com. That's where you'll find Ronan. ElsaJonesNutrition.ie for any nutritional therapy and anything else you need in the realm of food. And sleepystars.ie if you have little ones who are struggling with sleeping. Maybe you might even pick up a tip or two for yourself, is where Kelly will be giving you all that information. So to our contributors today, thank you guys so much. It was absolutely brilliant. Covered as much as we could. Thank you all for your questions as well. That came in throughout the week, Dermot and Dave at todayfm.com, and the ones that we didn't get to today. We apologise. But look, Mind Yourself Now, which is the umbrella under which this whole thing has happened, is on every single Monday on Dermot and Dave on Today FM. So if we didn't get to your question now, we will absolutely be having all of our experts back again throughout the year. Every Monday you can tune in and hear a different person. But thanks a million for tuning in today.